day, 2 sessions, very long day, but 2 very, very different topics. But before I start, who here has to write a paper? Okay. So I wanted to give you 2 options. We'll discuss it more tomorrow, but I wanted to cook in your head a little bit. One option is to read the play that I sent you that we're not studying, and that is God, Man, and Devil by Gordon. It was sent to you, and to write a paper on that. Okay. The second option is those who want to write on Broken Glass, that's the Arthur Miller play, and a little searching online on Arthur Miller, whose most famous play, of course, The Death of a Salesman, which I'm sure was translated into Ukrainian, Russian. And the third option is, for those who are ambitious, is to do some original research in the museum and in a library on the Jewish, or a Jewish play, let's put it this way, that was done here in Kiev. Now that could be a Russian company that did a Jewish play, or it could be one of the Jewish theaters that existed here, like I said. And I'm sure that a nice lady who was here yesterday would be most helpful to you. So think of it, it's a more ambitious thing, but it's also something new that no one has done, and a contribution. And something that in the long run, I think can also be published. For those who are, have dreams of more bigger academic career. So think of it. I don't know how it works here. I have no idea. In the United States, it's very easy. You go to the library, you ask for the file, or for the microfilm or whatever, and you sit there with newspapers and pictures and you go over it. I don't quite know how it's done here. I understand you need permission, you need this or that, but I leave it to you. I'm the visitor. You have to figure it out. If you're interested, I'd be more than happy. And if you need some extra time for that, fine with me. Okay, so sleep on it tonight, as you say. Dream of it, imagine it, and then think what you want to do. If it doesn't work, you can always go back to a conventional paper. Okay, questions? Nobody has any question here. What is it? Okay, so we start with a play that is being discussed right now in the United States. I'll tell you in a minute. And it's a play that has been discussed from the moment it came out, and that is God of Vengeance by Sholomash. Why is it discussed now? Because right now there's on Broadway a production, not of the play, but of a play called Indecent. You can look it up in your computers, by a playwright, a very well-known playwright called Paula Fogel. Paula Fogel, and Indecent is the name of the play, and it's quite successful, and it's one of the final candidates for the Tony Awards that are going to take place pretty soon. The Tony is like the Oscar. Tony is for theater, Oscar is for movies. So there's attention that is being given to it, and the play is about the play and all the scandals that surround it. So it's a play that has created interest from the moment it was written. And it's even though it's a play that is pretty old, it's over 100 years old, it still resonates, it still works, it still affects people. We read it, we know it's old material, but it touches on all kinds of things that we still talk about, that are still relevant to this day. And when was it? About 20 years ago, there was an adaptation of the play by another very well-known playwright, Donald Margulis, an American Jewish playwright, who wrote a version, not even a version, but he situated the play, he moved it from Russia to the Lower East Side in New York about the same time. I kept the text pretty much as is. The translation is a little newer, but... So this play, again, it's a classic. It's there, and it's bothersome to this day for various reasons. Now, has everyone read this play? Guys, how can you come to class and not read a play? You did read it?
Yes.
No, she said no.
I said no, yeah.
But the others did. Okay. So just a few words about Sholem Asch, the author. Sholem Asch is one of the most important writers of modern Yiddish literature. And he managed to be also quite controversial. Immensely talented. He's one of the few Yiddish writers who really made it as a world writer. Almost all his novels were translated into English. Some of them were very popular. But he was controversial. This play was controversial. We'll discuss it in a minute. And then we also, people had some problems with the fact that during the Second World War years, he was in America at the time. He was living in Connecticut. And when, Jews were killed in the millions, he was sitting, didn't do very much in this respect, and was sitting and writing 3 Christological novels. So one of them is very well known, The Man of Nazareth, and another one about Mary. And I remember as a little child, when he came to Israel for a visit, my father was a Yiddish journalist, and he came home and he said, "Mezog as Sholem Asch hat sich geschmat," that is to say that he converted, which at that moment sounded like a crazy thing to do, a horrible thing to do. It wasn't true. And actually he settled in Israel and later just went to London where his daughter lived and for some surgery and died there. But he managed to, he was not an easy person, very productive, terrific writer, but controversial, as we can see from this play. Now, his dates are 1886 to 1957. He died in 1957. So, God of Vengeance. What's the story? What is it about? Tell me the story. Or what? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Our third day together, you can open your mouth and talk. What is the play about? What's the story? The story, not even the plot. You know the difference between story and plot. Story is the whole thing. Plot is what happens, actually, in the play. So what is the story? The play is about...
Family.
About?
Family who wants to be...
Aristocracy.
Nothing.
It's about, basically it's about a girl. Her father was not a very good man. He was...
Well, it's about a man who does what?
Owned a public house.
Brothel.
A brothel. He's a brothel keeper.
Yeah.
He's a brothel keeper. And where's the brothel?
In the basement.
In the basement of his house. Of course, there's all kind of symbolism to it, but in the old world and maybe still here, it was quite common to have your business on the first floor and you live above it. Okay, so what does he do? He's married to a wife who used to be a hooker also, but now she wears a wig and they upstairs live a normal Jewish life. And they have a daughter. Okay, what happens?
He wanted to protect her because she was like innocent girl, but then
What does he want for the daughter? The daughter is very naive. She doesn't know anything. It's hard today to imagine a girl who doesn't barely goes out of the house.
They want to marry
But
her.
they want her.
They want to marry her.
They want her to marry, and to marry who? What?
Yeshivot.
Yeah, a boy from yeshiva.
A good Jew, a cultured Jew, someone who would bring respect, and she would be a good Jewish wife and mother. So basically, they want through her to do what? Because parents very often want to do it through their children, as you know. They want to do what through her?
To get some self-respect.
To get respect, to get out of this muck, the schmutz that they're in, and especially the father, and to become respectable members of the community. And what does the father mostly? He's especially eager to do that. What does he do in order to achieve it?
He ordered a Torah.
He orders the Torah scroll to be written, and not to be put in a synagogue as a gift, but rather,
For her future husband.
well, but to keep it where?
In her room.
In her room.
In her room. So that room becomes like what would you call it?
A sacred place.
A sacred place, right. And the idea is also that this will protect her. And we'll talk in a minute about the scroll, because this is the major issue in a way in this whole play. And what happens? This very innocent girl who really doesn't know from anything becomes friends because she's so alone in this house. Becomes friends with whom? With somebody called Manke. Who is Manke?
A girl from other brothel.
A prostitute from the brothel. And Manke does what? Manke, first of all, tries to get her out to go to a brothel that somebody else wants to open. And she starts a love affair with Rivkale. Okay? And what happens when it's discovered? You can still hush it up, but the father cannot deal with it. What does he do?
He sold his wife and his daughter to
He wrote them back, go back to where you belong, and gets the Torah scroll out of the house. Okay. Think for a second of the title of the play, God of Vengeance, God von der Kome. Why the name? We say good God of mercy, Al Malei Rachamim, but also God of vengeance. And the God of vengeance, why vengeance? What's the idea of vengeance here? Who pays for what?
Father
The father pays, or as he sees it, the father is a sinner. I mean, he runs a prostitution house. He's not. Who pays for it, really? The children. The children. This is if the children cannot really redeem themselves, find a way out of the sins of their parents. And so it goes from generation to generation. Are you familiar with another play, not a Jewish play, and not about prostitution, where this issue comes up? Where the children very often pay the price for the sins of the parents. Well, if you look at Ibsen, syphilis. That's exactly the idea, that the father sinned and then the child is the one who gets sick and pays for the sins of the former generation. Okay. So, all right, we'll talk more about this, but we spoke yesterday a little bit. All right, just a short history. The play was written in 1907, and it premiered shortly afterwards in German, in Berlin, not in Yiddish, at the Deutsches Theater, where Reinhardt ran the, you know, have you heard the name Max Reinhardt? He was the biggest name at the time of the German stage, until the Nazis come, of course. And a little while later, it comes to New York. It's done in Yiddish. It's translated into many, many languages, including Ukrainian, and it's done all over. Now, the play creates a storm. And what is the reason for the storm? There is a tendency today to blame it mostly on the lesbian scene. And that's not exactly correct and not exactly true. Originally in 1907, before the play was produced, the young Sholomash showed it to Yudlamet Peretz. Peretz was, of course, the god of Jewish literature. And Peretz says to him, you should burn the play and put it in the fire. But why? Here's the question. He says the second act, and he writes about it later, Peretz, a whole essay. The second act, which includes a love scene, is a jewel, is beautiful. What he did not like was basically the first and the third act. And why didn't he like it? Not because it was a prude, not because it was a house of prostitution or anything like that. The major problem, as he saw it, was, and others saw it as well, that there was a certain pandering to the Christian world. That the Torah scroll functions here like what? Not in a Jewish way at all. Because you don't bring a Torah scroll to protect a child. It functions like maybe a Virgin Mary in the room, or a cross in the room, or something of this nature. In this, he said, this is the Jewish life that is presented to the Goyim, and they're not going to know. They'll think this is it. And the truth of the matter is that the same idea comes up many years later, in 1923, when there's a famous trial in New York of the play, and the judge compares it to the host. He said the Torah, the scroll, is as sacred to the Jews as the host is to Christians. So this is essentially what Peretz did not like, this idea that he writes and misrepresents, in fact, Jewish customs and Jewish values. But, as I said, the play was done and create quite an uproar in the Jewish community, because it really showed, before World War I, it showed the dark side, the seedy side of Jewish life, which is something Jews never liked to show. and also because it mercilessly attacked, in fact, the religious establishment. There was a character there, Reb Ali, who sort of whitewashes things for money. He arranges for basically a pimp to get a Torah scroll without really telling the scribe what the story is. He arranges for a wedding that almost happens, only everything gets destroyed at the end. He said, don't tell them anything, we'll just do it quickly and we'll give them some extra money and we'll arrange it. So if Reb Ali is the representative of the religious establishment, this is quite awful. It means that this establishment is what?
Merchants.
It's what?
Merchants. It's like,
That it's corrupt.
yeah.
That it's corrupt. That it doesn't have any ideals. That with money you can, manage your way around and get whatever you want. And that made a lot of the older people, including those who were not religious, very angry. It was not something they were comfortable with. On the other hand, some young people were very gung-ho against orthodoxy, religious orthodoxy, saw it in the play an expression of their sentiment. And so the intense, well, I wouldn't say scandal, but the intense debate concerning the play really represented the different values and beliefs and aspirations of different sections of the Jewish world in Eastern Europe. Now, what stood at the heart, really, of the attack, to a large extent, was basically the use of a ritual object as a prop. Remember, we spoke a little bit yesterday about props, and this is exactly what the Torah scroll is in this play. It serves as a kind of talisman. You know what the talisman is? A kind of, that has some sort of magic in it, but it has no ethical significance, meaning really at all, because the prostitution business still goes on. Yeah, he's talking about stopping it, but let's make a little more money before we stop it. So, what we see is that, as I said before, that money can buy you, basically in that community, what you want, more or less, and it doesn't matter that this money was gained from what? It's criminal money from prostitution. It's what the whores pay him. And with this, he commissions a Torah scroll. And so this religiosity that he attempts may be just a facade. It's not something serious, it's not real. And in fact, perhaps the love between the two women is a lot more honest and pure than what the other people engage in, which is not honest at all. Now, the use of the Torah scroll and its association with the female body made many people angry, whether religious or not so religious or not religious at all. As I told you, Ash called on him to just burn the play, and it's not only that the Torah scroll is used as a prop. This we can see also in other plays, but this combination of a whorehouse downstairs, and we see it, And the Torah scroll upstairs in the same space, next to it, adjacent kind of to each other, is something that made people feel that he was pushing the boundary too far, that he was going too far with this. That this is a monstrosity of Judaism. It's not the truth. It's not the real thing. I'll just read you a short quote from Peretz, who says, "For what purpose does all this take place?" And he says, "For effect." Effect? And the Gentile does not know. It is a flirtation with the Christian public. So, let's talk for a second about Torah scrolls and femininity and the feminine body and so forth. We've encountered it before. Think of the Dybbuk for a moment. Remember the old woman who runs into the synagogue, opens the Aron Kodesh and talks to the Torah, asking for what? For the life of whom? Of her daughter. The daughter is giving birth, and it's a very difficult birth. And she could die. You know, women died quite often back then in childbirth. And she runs to the Torah scroll to plead with it. It should save her daughter's life. So the Torah is described in, I cannot say in Judaism because there are 100 different ways you can look and find whatever you want almost. But there are quite a few sources where it's described as the daughter of God or the bride of the people of Israel. And that's why you have to keep it safe and save it and keep it pure. So somehow there is an association between a young woman and the Torah. And here I'll read you a rabbinic text that this may be compared to a king who has a daughter for whom he built a palace. He sets it in the midst of 7 other palaces and then decrees, "Anyone who approaches my daughter will be as though he were approaching me." The Holy One, blessed be he, said, "Anyone who disrespects my daughter is considered as though he were disrespecting me." That is, if a man enters the synagogue and disparages my Torah, it is though he arose and were disparaging my honor. Think of it for a second. It's quite strong. That is to say, the Torah is closed in the way a father closes his daughter so that nobody touches her, or it, or it depends. Another midrash that I'll read to you about Proverbs 5:20, I'll read it to you in English translation. "It is better for you to embrace the breasts of Torah, which brings you merit, than to embrace an alien bosom, which brings you to sin." Again, the association of Torah and the female body. Now, we do know that there are some Jewish, mostly Sephardic groups where it was customary to bring a Torah book to the room where the woman was giving birth. again, this association, especially if she had problems giving birth. And think of it, I'll push it even further. What is done in synagogue with a Torah? Think of the whole process. Where is it kept? It's closed and, okay. So what is done when you break it out? What is the first thing you do? Well, first of all, you open it. You open it. It's very beautifully, usually embroidered and so forth. You take it out. In what shape? It's still covered.
Covered like a clothes.
Well, it's still covered with a garment, essentially, a beautiful garment, embroidered usually. And what do? Think of an older synagogue. You take it, the women are sitting up there. You take it amongst the men, right? And what do?
Brought the bill.
Once you bring it to the bima to be read, what do? You undress it. You undress it, you open it, and you read it with
Yeah.
yad, which is not with you're not supposed to touch it with your own hands, which is made of metal or wood. Okay. You see the association here. Okay. So, let's see some interesting parts of the text. Let's go to page 13. Wait, how does it go? Okay. Sarah, the wife, the former prostitute, is a much more practical woman than her husband. And in this respect also a lot less interesting in a way, because he has some aspirations. He wants to rise from the muck he's in. She's very practical. The whole world, basically, she tells us, is a whorehouse. Okay? So let's read the conversation. Yeckel says here, do you expect respectable folks to come to your home? Have you forgotten who you are, perhaps? And what does she say? To anyone who's willing to read? No? Yeah? Sarah, what does she say? Who you are? What? Have you stolen anything? You have a business. Everybody has his own business. You don't compel anybody, do you? Compel meaning force. You don't force anybody. You may do what you please, can't you? If you yourself do no wrong, just try to give them some money and see whether they'll take it from you or not. So this kind of, oops, this goes a little too fast for me. Yeckel is a little more careful, Yanko. He says, yeah, they'll take it from you all right, but they look upon you as a dog. Just the same. And at the synagogue, you'll have the back seat. And they'll never call you up to the altar to read from the Holy Book. And she continues, do you really believe that they're any better than you? You don't need their favors. That's the way of the world these days. If you've got the money, even so pious a Jew as Rebali comes to your home, a pietist, mind you, a tzaddik, and accepts handsome alms from you. He asks no questions, whether you got it by theft or by murder. So long as you have the cash, that is the chief point. What do you say to this? Is that capitalism? Is it religious life? Is it Jewish society at the time? But it's somehow, we know people who talk like that.
It's reality.
I'm sorry?
It's reality.
It's reality. Is it reality? Your business could be pornography, could be smut, could be whatever. If you've made the money and you're willing to pay, it's a business like any other business. As long as it's not criminal, you don't kill someone, you don't. You hear people talk like this today? Yes?
It's
No?
crime.
What?
It was crime. It was prostitute. He sold people.
No, it's not
No,
a crime.
it was a legal business.
No, it's not a crime. It wasn't considered. He's not doing something criminal. We, certain societies criminalize it. No, it's not criminal. There were even rabbis who said you could take contributions from prostitutes. For good purpose, absolutely, for synagogue. Yeah. So, even though it's money that comes from prostitution. But other people talk like this today, I think a lot. I think in our society more so than before. What difference does it make? I just had a conversation with someone who tells me that her daughter, that's in the United States, is marrying a guy who wants to go into the business of legal marijuana. Now, okay, so if it's legal, why not take the opportunity, make the money? Nobody asked, it's okay. If you have the money, you'll buy your way into everything. He's still a little careful. He says, don't climb too high, Sarah. You hear? Not too high. For if you do, some fine day, you'll fall and break your neck. This is a kind of foreshadowing. You know what foreshadowing is? Something that you kind of predict without knowing that will happen to whom? To him, in fact. Okay? And shakes a warning finger. And don't try to break into the upper crust. Don't, I tell you. You have a home of your own, stay there. You've got bread, eat. But don't intrude where you're not wanted. Every dog must know his own kennel. And he said, the whole business is beginning to make me uneasy. I'm afraid that this will bring the downfall of our hopes. So he is this figure who wishes to go up, 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 but also understand that it could be the end of everything, that it may not work, that you have to be careful with ambition. And basically he predicts exactly what's going to happen. He's pushing it too far. And so she says to him, and you're a man, shame yourself. I'm only a woman, but I can say to myself, the past is gone forever, whizzed, flown away. There's nobody to be ashamed of. The whole world isn't any better. Why? If it were, people would have to go about with their heads bowed to the earth, because everybody is a sinner. In a little while, you'll have money, you'll close up shop, and not a rooster crows. Who needs to know what we were? And she said that would be best, to buy a pack of horses and smuggle them across the border, just like Isaac Furman did, and become a respectable person. Not have people eye you like this. She says, just the same, it's too bad to go out of business. You'll never make such good money from your horses. Here at least it's all cash. And he said, it's certainly true. And so he said, I'll wait, I'll make a little more money, and then I'll be the man I want to be. This is something we all do. We push, we'll wait a little, then we'll do it. Wait with it. So he wants to go high, he wants to reach God, but he cannot fully elevate himself. He cannot really renounce everything and be the person he would like to be. His feet are stuck in the basement, so to speak. And what happens at the end, where's that? I'm sorry. Check the page. I know. Talking about the Torah, I want to go back to, I'm sorry, to this and to page 25, where the scroll, where the scribe explains what the scroll is. And know what your health host, and know that the Holy Scroll is a wondrous possession. The whole world rests upon a scroll of the law, and every scroll is the exact counterpart of the tablets that were received by Moses upon Mount Sinai. Every line of a holy scroll is penned in purity and piety. Where dwells a scroll, in such a house dwells God himself. So it must be guarded against every impurity. Man, you must know that the Holy Scroll, and when he hears these words, these serious words, that the scroll really speaks honestly, not like Rebbe who's going. He says, Rebbe, I want to tell the Rebbe the whole truth, the honest truth. I'm a poor sinner. Rebbe, I'm afraid. And Rebbe Ali whitewashes this. He said, in the middle of it, he said, the man is a sincere penitent about tshuva. It is our duty to befriend him. The Talmud counsels us to. Of course he understands the significance of a holy scroll. He's a Jew after all. You must have reverence for a scroll of the law. Great reverence. Precisely as if a noted rabbi were under your roof. In the house where it resides, no profanity must be uttered. It must dwell amidst purity. And so he goes on and on. Basically, he shuts the scribe down, and he also says, yeah, I'm taking over. And then the scribe says, you hear, sir, the whole world rests upon the scroll. The fate of our race lies rolled up in that parchment. With one word, with a single word, God forbid, you can desecrate the law and break down upon all the Jews their grievous misfortunes. And Ghetto wants to continue and says, Rebbe, I'll confess everything. I know that you are a holy man. I'm not worthy, Rebbe, of your presence in this house, under my roof. Rebbe, I'm a sinner. She is a sinner. That's his wife. We have no right to a holy scroll inside the room. And then he points at the door. For her sake, Rabbi, she may go about the Holy Scroll. She is as pure as the Lord's law itself. She is as pure as a Torah scroll. And here he begins something a little dangerous. The association of his daughter with the Torah scroll. It will be placed in her room, and when you're married and leave my roof, take the scroll of the law with you and your husband, and so on and so forth. What do you say about this association of the father, of the Torah scroll, and the daughter? It's kind of scary when you think of it. The daughter is a human being, and
As you told before, as you read before, that Rabbi's association with king and his daughter, his Kadosh Baruch Hu and Torah, and it's the same that now we see in the play. That the father talked about his daughter as.
And he begins, later on, as things begin to go bad, to confuse the two. And when he says, the Torah, no, he says it's been desecrated. It's not clear. He's talking about the Torah, he's talking about the daughter. And then when Rabbi says, oh, it's the daughter, oh, okay, then we can, that's okay, we can deal with that. It's not the Torah. Now, let's go to Act 3, page 81. Basically, he says, it's all done, it's all ruined. I cannot avoid it. She's paying for my sins. Keeps repeating it again and again. And Reb Ali says, don't speak like that. A Jew must not utter such things. Trust in the Lord and say the past is dead and gone. Is the past ever dead and gone? Never really. And Yekel says, don't try to console me, Rabbi. I know that it's too late. Sin encircles me and mine like a rope around a person's neck. God wouldn't have it. But I ask you, Rebbe, why wouldn't he have it? What harm would it have done him if I, Yekel Shevchovitz, should have been raised from the mire into which I have fallen? He goes to the room, breaks the Torah scroll, raises it aloft, and he talks to the Torah scroll. This is a very, very dramatic moment. And what does he say? You, Torah scroll, I know you're a great God. So at this point, the Torah scroll is already God. For you are our Lord. I, Yekel Shevchovitz, have sinned. And he goes like this. My sins, work a miracle. Send down a pillar of fire to consume me. On this very spot where I now stand, open up the earth at my feet and let it swallow me. But shield my daughter. Send her back to me as pure and innocent as when she left. I know. To you, everything is possible. Work a miracle. For you are an almighty God. And if you don't, now he's threatening, then you're no God at all. I tell you. I, Yekel Shevchovitz, tell you that. You're as vengeful as any human being. It's quite the scene. He's talking to God, but he confuses already God with the Torah scroll. It's not exactly the same. So the very idea that an object, after all, is God, is of course something that for a Jew is not quite comfortable. And this is what Peretz objects to. You're turning it into something it is not. Maybe in Catholicism that would be the case. I don't know enough about it, but not in Judaism. The idea of God is a very abstract being, and what Yaakov does as a simple man is take this Torah scroll and turned it into God, which is the very opposite, in essence, of the abstract nature of Judaism. And then she comes with they come in with the girl, and let's go to page 98, which is a very grand scene. Yaakov at this point has completely gone crazy. He's lost his. Rabbi still comes and says, "Well, yeah, this gentleman will guard him like the apple of his eye. He'll have to that." He's still trying to get the shit up. And Yaakov indicates Rivka's room and says, "Yes, she'll sit inside there and study the sacred books. I have a virtuous Jewish daughter." He comes, he drags Rivka out. She's half dressed, her hair is wild. He points at her and says, "Your son will marry a virtuous Jewish daughter, I say. She will bear him pure Jewish children, even as all pious daughters. Isn't that so?" And she laughs wildly to the stranger. "Yes, indeed, my friend. She'll make a pure, pious little maid. My wife will lead her under the wedding canopy. Down into the brothel, down below, down into the brothel." He drags Rivka by her hair to the door. "Down into the brothel with you, down." Sarah says, "Good God, he's gone stark mad." She tries to do something, and she drags his wife also, and he says, "Down to the brothel with you, both of you." And the stranger, "What is this?" And all Yaakov has to say at the end, "Take the Holy Scroll along with you. I don't need it anymore." Now, first of all, I want to hear from you. This is a very, very strong scenes. And they called for a very great actor. Originally, the role was played by Rudolf Schildkraut, who was a German actor, but also later became a Yiddish actor, was German-Jewish. And he later on brought it to New York. And originally in New York, it was played shortly after it opened by David Kessler, who was one of the great, great dramatic actors. Fast forward to 1923. The play has been translated into English, and it's produced in English with Schildkraut, the same Schildkraut, first time on the English stage in the starring role of Ghetto. When it's in a small theater in the village, nothing much happens. It's a theater for the intelligentsia, but then the producer gets more ambitious, and there's much interest in the play, and he moves it to Broadway. Now, what does it mean to move it to Broadway? To open it up, to the main public, to everybody. Not just for Jews, not just for intellectuals, for everybody. And at that point, the year is 1923. A rabbi, Rabbi Joseph Silverman, a reformed rabbi, goes to the police and files a complaint about indecency. And by the end of the evening, the police comes and arrests everybody, including Shalomash. And there's a famous photograph of the entire cast and Ash in a police station. And it comes to trial. It comes to trial, and at first they're found guilty. It is later reversed. But the damage has been done. The play moves to a much smaller theater, and it's the end of that. One of the now, here comes something interesting in terms of theater history, because almost everyone who's written about this, it became a cause célèbre. It was one of the very few plays in America where there's no censorship. There was no such thing as censorship. That the theater piece and people who were involved in it were condemned like this. What happens here? There are a few questions here. Brothel plays, you had plenty of those. It was not a new thing. What's at work here? Why would a rabbi in 1923, and he's not an Orthodox rabbi, go to the police to complain about it? After all, it's a Jewish show. Why should he do it? Any idea? It's a major, major scandal. Well, think of it. What kind of life does it represent? You could say he's insulted as a religious Jew, perhaps, but he didn't go when the play was, downtown. Think of it. It's 1923. A year later, immigration is closed. This gives Jews a very bad reputation. There's enough talk about prostitution, and prostitution was a problem in Jewish society, no question about it. And certainly in New York, there was one street on the Lower East Side that was known for its prostitutes. So here, to bring it to all of America, Jews as owners of bordellos, of prostitutes, and all this low life, this is terrible. Shut it up. Get it off. We don't want to be represented like this. Because one of the big fights in America is, of course, over the image of Jews. Jews don't have to fight for legal rights. They always have them. But they care a very great deal, and especially, by the way, Reformed Jews, because they're mixed in with the general population, much more so than the very Orthodox. This reflects on me, this reflects on everybody. We're trying to somehow do something to keep immigration going, and they're coming with a play like this. Now, many claim nowadays that, or want to see it, as if the trouble for the play and the complaint to the police and all that was because of the lesbian scene. And of course, gay rights people find it very comforting to take the case of this and say, look what happened back then. But the truth is that unlike the published play, when it was done on Broadway, lesbian scene wasn't in. It was removed. And so, yes, there was indecency and this and that, but. So, what what's going on here? There's still references in the court papers to this relationship between the two women. Apparently they preferred to use the printed text rather than the text that was used on stage. And there may be some other elements in there. One person who wrote about it like all the others and claimed, you know, that it was the system went down on a gay play and so on and so forth, later revisited all the documents and wrote a new essay and said, no. What happens here really? There are a few things. Because brothel plays, you have plenty. A, nobody repents. The prostitutes don't repent. There's nobody repents for that. Because normally in a play with prostitution at the end, even if you take Mrs. Warren's Profession, for instance, George Bernard Shaw, there's the sorry part. B, they don't just talk about the brothel, they actually show it on stage. And it shows that the foundation of the family upstairs is the brothel downstairs. This makes it even worse. And thirdly, there could have been, and she's not Jewish, and she writes it, there could have been a touch of anti-Semitism there also. You know, these Jews with sex and that. Okay. Hence the story. But the story remains as a kind of attack on a gay play to this day. And with this new play, Indecent, this is really the scene that is seen, the scene that the playwright sees as the core, as the heart of the problem of the play. But I'm not so sure that is the case in terms of Ash. Ash wanted the scene of corruption. He was not out there, even though he was very generous when it comes to writing about women and so forth, but he did not come to write a play about gay life. That was not the intention. The intention was the corruption and the double standard of the upstairs and downstairs, and of the system and of the people in charge, and also, and I find it as the most inspiring, of the desire of a sinner, of a simple man who knows he's a sinner, whose feet are really in the basement, somehow for something higher. Not for prestige, he doesn't look for money, he doesn't look for, even for so much for prestige. He wants to get closer to God. He wants to be a good Jew. He wants something spiritual, and he's unable to get it. And with this, the whole family goes under. So it's a strong play, and it's still done. And I'll tell you a little anecdote. About 20 years ago, no more than that, I think in the 80s, the play was done in Israel in Beersheba theater. And at that time there was still censorship. I mean, the censor had to comment, okay. And he had one thing to say. One critic had no problem with the whole story and everything. But the Torah scroll. And they said to him, but it's not a real Torah scroll, it's a prop. There's nothing inside. He said, yeah, but still, make sure it never comes to the lower floor of the brothel. That I cannot approve. This is pushing it too far. So this is the story of the God of Vengeance. Any question on that? Any comment? Because if you don't, I have a question for you. What do you think, regardless of your religion, of this whole, of the use of religious objects, whether they're fake or real, doesn't even matter so much, on stage? not just Jewish, in general. Is it pushing the boundaries too much? Are there things you cannot really, that you cannot accept or that would bother a lot of people? No such thing? Nothing, really? Because there used to be laws about it. You couldn't have a cross on the stage.
Our society is not so religious.
I'm sorry?
And our society is not so religious, so we are not touched by all these norms.
No,
But
but
that's my opinion.
I'm asking, are there things you would not want to, not you personally, but that people would be made uncomfortable?
Religious people will not live in the same building with brothel. I think that's the first. The second, they will don't make some sacred things in this house. Maybe they will have a special building for this, not in their own house.
Anything else?
It's not a...
You realize that in many plays, we're not talking now about Jewish plays, there's no real wedding. Jewish plays are always filled with chassanis, always. But think of it. We're told that they're getting married, but you don't actually see a wedding on stage. Why is that? We're not supposed to. There were certain Christian things you were not allowed to have on stage. And it was either understood or the censor certainly made sure that it wasn't there. Because people felt it insulted their belief, that it makes something cheap out of their religion, that if a Torah scroll can be, or its equivalent, I'm not just talking about, could be just a prop filled with, I don't know, whatever they put inside, plastic bubble or whatever, it's a desecration. And it just makes us too uncomfortable to see it, and so we don't have it. Just as in, to make, of course not to compare, but you couldn't actually in Greek tragedy see killing of blood on stage. It was done off stage. They didn't do it, they didn't show it. There's certain things that societies, not we, but that societies do not want to tolerate on stage. And religious customs is one of them, certainly. Okay, questions, comments? Who liked the play? Liked it. I don't know how the translation is, I have no idea. I don't even know what year the translation is from. Can you tell me the Russian translation?
It was the original from 1907.
1907. So this is probably when the play was done in Russian. It was done, I know it was done. It was done in many languages. Another, and I'll finish with that anecdote. Some years later, in the 1930s, somebody came to Sholomash and asked for permission to produce a play, and she refused. He said, this play should not be done. The times have changed. It's not what it was back then, and she refused to give permission. And that was it. So, he also felt that maybe the play at the time of fascism and the world that is going mad is not something that you would like to see. Okay, so we'll stop now unless you want to say something or ask something. And, yeah.
Are there a lot of theatres that make this play now on stage?
Is this done on stage?
Now, at this day.
Now, what you have now is this play Indecent about this play.
Yes, but in another theatres, maybe in Israel or in
It's done every few years, yes, yes, yes. Look, it doesn't have the canonical position of the Dybbuk. The Dybbuk is done all every other time, like in opera, you know, this one does it this way and that way. It's always associated with scandal somehow, but with the whole gay movement, it got a whole new life. So you see how a text, how a play also changes somewhat its orientation and its use according to the time in which it is performed. And you see it with Shakespeare too. Nobody does Shakespeare today the way it was done then. It's used to convey a certain new meaning. And that is mostly what it is associated with now, or used for now. Or for talk about censorship. Censorship is not a big problem nowadays, but the gay issue is something people talk about, so here there's a play that stands for it, that you can produce it. Any other question? Yes?
If Rivka could be associated with the Torah,
Yeah.
could we associate the Father with this old-fashioned God of vengeance?
It's a matter of interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could. You can take it anywhere you want. You see, basically this is the job of the director. What do I want to do with it? And I have to say that Paula Fogel, who's Jewish and gay, certainly took it in this direction. Could come somebody else and take it in a different direction. And it's a question of emphasis and interpretation. What do you do with it? One thing I can promise you, an Orthodox person is not going to produce this play.